Salam. I wanted to take this 15 minutes. I'm on my way to church to discuss the current course or the other courses. If you have any questions or discussions, there would be a good time to do this now. So prepare yourself with questions, and I will say Our Father as you are preparing for like 15 minutes until I reach the church. It's 5:20. I will be there, God willing. So let's say Our Father. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Make us worthy, O Lord, to say thankfully, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory now and forever. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So now we're doing moral theology, and it's a untrodden path. I will say in our growing up, we grew up with the stories of the saints, and we grew up with the tradition of the church, but seldom that we hear about moral issues. And I always attribute this to that we are more a church that is centered around the martyrs and the desert saints. So and that leads to, in many ways, lack of ability to think about the society, the cultural issues, the current problems. Something I think that the Catholic Church in the West, being sheltered from persecution in many ways, and I'm talking about Roman Catholic and the West in general, then out of the Roman Catholic, of course, we consider them part of that side of the church is the Protestant movements. They were sheltered from the persecution that the Orthodox had suffered, all kinds of Orthodox, actually, you name it, across the board, whether the Copts in Egypt or the Syriac in Syria or the Armenian in Armenia, or even the Russian did not escape the persecution. For the longest time, they were protected by the Tsars and the Christian rulers, but then in the 20th century, early 20th century, with the communist movement and the communist persecution of Christians, that was a very, very aggressive one. Also, the Russian Orthodox suffered that persecution. But so that's why I think in our tradition, thinking about cultural issues and, for example, how do you think about leaders and governments, and how do you think about or prepare for election, and is it okay to be involved in political life or not? What would you do if you are a president who is a Christian president, which something is unthinkable in our background? But if that is to happen, one of the countries is Lebanon, always known as a country with a Christian president and a Muslim prime minister. So how do you deal with that? How do you think about it? What kind of rules you go by? This is a little bit vague. We always pray for the president, but we don't know what it feels like to be one. Unfortunately, I'm driving. Shireen and I would not be able to share the screen because I don't have one. The screen I have now is what you see. It's the same as your screen with the multiple icons on it. So, but in 10 minutes, I'll be in church and I will share my computer screen with you. But I need you to now to think about questions related to this course or to the courses to come. I hope that you kind of assimilated the subject that we studied until now, talking about good and evil. What do they mean? Where they come from? How we can judge that moral actions. and that what we have studied up till this point. And we're going to prepare today to enter into more the social setup, what's good and evil in the culture, in the community, how we think about that. So if you have any questions you want to share with me, I can briefly read short comments on the chat, or you can say it verbally. Or in other courses, actually, so that you, one of the things we're doing now is moral theology, but then once we get done with moral theology, I want to go into spiritual theology, and that is more or less the tradition of the desert. These are the people, the teachers of spirituality. And we have a plethora, plenty of writings of spiritual fathers from the desert who left us a great heritage, and we seldom go there. We know very briefly about their lives, and sadly so. Tomorrow, Sunday, tomorrow, we will commemorate the departure of St. John, the short, as we know him in Egypt, John Colobus, or in the West, they know him as John the Dwarf, and his beautiful, beautiful story as a disciple of Saint Benoit, and also as a mature saint who was almost constantly in a state of we call ecstasy, a state of ecstasy, always outside his mind and outside himself, were immersed completely in God, constantly, day in and day out. Something amazing and something very inspiring to think about. And one of story that gets me personally to think about is how our faith and our real life in God is a mystery. We can get drawn to it. We can get intrigued by the life of the saints, how to be drawn into the life of prayer and the life of the meditation on the gospel. And there's no end to that journey. And then some people like John the Short and Saint Bishoy and Saint Benoit, Saint Macarius, Saint Anthony, Saint Pachomius were dedicated completely to that work. And they achieved um, great heights. They reached great heights, and they went into great depth in relationship with God that is very difficult to imagine us as a church without this kind of life. It's really very difficult, because otherwise, if there's no such people and there's no such lives, our work and be existence as a church will be a group of rules. What we have is do's and don'ts, and that's it. So moral theology from one aspect is our life in the culture, in the world, but the spiritual exercise and the spiritual life is the inner mystery of our encounter with God, each one of us and all of us as a church. So if you have any questions or any discussion or want to ask something or discuss something or an explanation for anything, it's the time to do so. I didn't want you to just keep waiting like I've done this a few times, and I feel very guilty about it. Or in the other courses, we've until now we did Old Testament, and we did dogmatic theology before. Dogmatic theology, the creed. We looked into the creed and what we believe as Christians and as a church. And we did Old Testament, and then we've done New Testament, and before that we've done ritual theology. And we are currently doing the moral, which will be done actually in a couple of more sessions. And then we have the spiritual theology, and which is a short course also. We're not going to go in depth, which will take years to complete. And then the last part of our study would be developmental structure of what each grade and what each class, what each group of kids would need, and how they think and how they participate in the class differs from one age to another. And then we finish by actually 1 or 2 times about giving a lesson, how to give a lesson, how to control the class management. And I think that would be it. It's not really, we're not far from finishing our cycle of studying. What we are studying this time is the moral theology is taken from the Catholic catechesis, from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and we took from it what suits or what is fitting or what's suitable or agreeable with the Orthodox Church. Okay, that's, I have here John, Angie, Suzanne, and Sherry. If any of you four have any question about anything about the past courses or the future part that we're going to finish, let me know. You want anything done differently about the presentation also, how things are run? And if you are silent, I think everything is perfect and everything is to the best. And you don't really need anything extra or more, or there's no questions or wondering about anything else.
Okay, Buna. Do you think you can slow down?
Slow down in the speed of talking or the delivery?
The speed of talking.
I talk too fast? Is that what you mean? I'm not offended, but just let me know.
You talk too fast, and it keeps making me and my mom lose some information.
All right, but you have it recorded. I apologize for that, but if you have it recorded, do you listen to it again if you missed something?
Yeah.
I'm sorry for this, but here is my point of defense is I have a lot of material to be given and I don't want to drag on forever, and I have very limited time. My hope is that when it is recorded, that you can actually go there and listen to it again. I know I'm packing a lot of material into small amount of time, but I'll do my best to slow down a little bit. I will do my best. Okay, thank you for that feedback.
There's a comment that says, can you suggest church fathers who wrote on moral theology?
Sure. One of them is for sure I know is Saint John Chrysostom, and also Saint Gregory of Nyssa. I have a whole book, a thesis on Saint Gregory of Nyssa's development of moral theology. And when you look at the church fathers or the sermons of the patriarchs or the missals and the letters, each of them tackle one subject. So when you go to church fathers, you're going to have to go into a lot of church fathers to gather the same material that you're getting in this course. I can't imagine one church father giving you a whole round of moral issues. I know for sure St. John Chrysostom was talking about social justice, big time. He was a hero of social justice. He saw a lot of rich people around him in Constantinople and a lot of poor people, and they were not really helping at all. So his sermons was filled with admonitions of rich people to build churches where they can actually have poor people pray, and those who work for them. There was a whole sermon on that in his commentary on St. John. There's a lot about the rich and the poor in his talk, and about money. I know Saint Gregory of Nyssa had some kind of what you call values that he was discussing. I don't think that he mentioned it exactly like that, but he was talking about what is good and what's better and what's best, and how we develop that the formation of the conscience. So there's different church fathers who approach different things. But with the Catholic catechesis, this is one of the things that the Catholic catechesis is excellent in, is that it's bringing everything together, all of these items together into different subjects, and the way they organize it, the way they head it, and even sometimes the vocabulary. And of course, we have the catechesis drew from not only from the church fathers, and the church fathers themselves depended on or taken from Greek philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, and to use their terminology. For example, they used the terminology that we're going to use today is something called the concept of subsidiary. We're going to talk about it today, subsidiary. This is an earlier concept that they used the term to describe something divine, something that God has done. And also some other concepts. We'll talk about it today in the social setup, how there ought to be certain rules. And Plato, especially Plato, and maybe a little bit Aristotle talked about it as they talked about the utopia, the perfect social setup. And we're going to look into that and see how these were natural laws. Basically and simply, they're just logic, basic common sense that should be expected in every culture. And how when these don't really are not met, there's a lot of injustice and chaos and anger, frustration. And so they formulated the idea of common good. What's a common good? That's something that's, again, was in the Greek philosophy, an idea of a goal that everyone in the culture is working for. And that goal helps each one of them, another special group, and excludes others. So that common good has to be explained. What's a common good? And why is it important that we keep that common good at the center of the focus of the work of the leadership, of the authority? And what happens when the authority does not work for the common good? What happens when somebody does not work for the common good and they work for a private good? And then we have a big problem on our hand that's morally unacceptable. So these things, I'm going to say, just because the church fathers each had a dilemma to deal with, they had a problem in their time. And when you think about it, it's in all aspects. Like St. Athanasius writes about the divinity of Christ. He had approached other subjects, but his main thrust was the divinity of Christ. St. Cyril, for example, he had defended the unity of Christ, that he is one person, the single person in which the two divine and human natures became one. And each of them had to struggle with this, and each of them had an issue in their time that they had to deal with. And if you look at history, you have plenty of issues that keeps recycling, and then we come back this age, and we are dealing with them again. So we go back to the fathers and look what they had. How did they deal with that? So that's what I would say. At least go back to Saint John Chrysostom, and also Saint Gregory of Nyssa. Okay. I'm almost there. 2 minutes, I'll be in the church. I have, I don't know, I think I send the documents. I'm gonna send the completed chapter 1. And this time we'll work on chapter 2. And I'm gonna send them both tonight. The questions are going to follow. I didn't get the time to write a review question, but I hope that we read the documents and listen to the talk. And I'm gonna try to slow down so that things are a little bit clear and we're not missing anything. And also we'll send the quiz so that people can review the material. I would also suggest that some material does not get digested easily. It needs time. It needs some work. So you let it sit for a little bit and go and read it again. And all of a sudden, something new comes out and really you realize there's something different about it, or you understood it a little bit deeper, more. So more than one reading. And I tell this to the kids in the school. A good reader reads the material more than one time. They don't read it only once. You might not get nothing out of reading, or 10% maximum of reading it the first time. Okay, I'm here.
Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory now and forever. Amen. Okay, I'm sharing the screen. We're done with the first chapter about good and evil, the calling of man, what is man vocation in the world, how we are supposed to be. And we said to be is to be in the image of God, which is Christ-like. Then the next one is communion. Human communion is how we are to deal with one another, and as a society, and as a culture, as a community. It doesn't specifically says which community, but it assumes family, country, and even monastery, church. So we asked the same question. What was the source of the moral right and wrong? We said the divine likeness. So what's the source of human communion? And the human communion is the source of it is in the relationship of the three persons of the divinity, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So the unity or the union of the three divine persons is reflected in the communion of the human race. Whatever God was planning humans to act with one another is what he has with his Son and the Spirit. The unity of the human race is intended in the very act of their creation. And I add this because when God created, let me explain this a little bit. When God created humans, he didn't create a single person. He actually created two. He didn't create a single person, he created two. If he created a single person, then we know that God will deal with us as persons, and he wants us to be complete as persons. But he created a man, and then he created a woman. So the act of creation involved two persons. And when Adam woke up after Eve was created, Adam looked at her and said, she is called a woman because she's taken from a man. And then from that moment on, the man has to leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two become one flesh. Adam himself says, behold, she's bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. There is unity. And if you look at it carefully, it actually is similar to the Trinity, because there is a source and there is another person coming from the source, and we think of the two and the three as one existence. It's God who also said it's not good for man to be alone. So there is humanity that's created in the image and likeness and predestined to be in the likeness of God, but also the plurality, the multiple in the human family is an image of God, the triune persons. Trinity in unity, humanity in unity. When we go into the governing, who should be in leadership? Who is the one to take care of the family? First of all, any group of any community without authority, without government, is predestined to chaos, ruin. Somebody has to take care of business. So they need, first of all, we need social structure to grow and develop. We cannot develop away from a social structure. Before a person becomes a solitary person, they need a family. You always hear about the hermits, Saint Anthony. Tomorrow we're gonna celebrate one of my favorite saints from my country, from my town, from my hometown, Saint John the Short, a beautiful saint from Luxor. And he is one of the very, very impressive hermits. But all of them started in a beautiful Christian family. They didn't come out of nothing. No one was born in a secluded place and had a very good relationship with God and was happy. This never happened. They come from a family, and the family is loving and nurturing good morals. They direct them toward God, and then when they grow and mature, they want more from God, want more of God, and less of other humans. But they start with the family. So the family and the state are social settings suitable for the human nature. There is something important about that. They used to say, and after World War II, in Germany, in Berlin especially, there was a lot of orphans. They picked them up from the destroyed buildings. A building will be knocked down by shelling, by the airplanes, and they find a baby crying in the rubble, and the big mass of destroyed material from the house, and they will be crying under the trash. They will pick them up and put them in orphanages or a facility. They have a big hole, and they said they had too many of them, too many, thousands of those little babies, but they had nobody, not enough care for them, no hands to carry them, no hands to clean them up or feed them. So what they had, there was like two nuns in a big hole like this with hundreds of babies stacked like this, and they had made lines, like assembly lines, like ropes with bottles. It goes from one baby to another. After 10 minutes, they change and they go to another baby. Make sure they just watch. Make sure that the baby actually that uh, the sucking piece of the bottle is actually touching their mouth, and they are taking it. And they followed those babies, and as they grew up, they said at least have 50% of them ended up in prisons for big crimes, big crimes. So they did this study on these kids who had not been handled. So we need social structure to grow and develop. And that's what God said from the beginning. It's not good for man to be alone. Can we put on some light, please? The human person should be the foundation and the goal of any social structure. If the social structure does not serve the human person, that's not a good social structure. That's why we in this study we will learn about the collectivism, that the human person doesn't matter, it's the group. And this is something not Christian at all, at all. In the gospel, what do we see? Although Jesus was interested in building the church, but he cared for each individual. There is a Samaritan woman, he goes to that Samaritan woman, but he uses the Samaritan woman to build the church in Samaria. There is a Zacchaeus who is away from the church and doesn't have any friends. Jesus goes and visits him. So this social structure, any structure should have the person as their focus, not the group. And there's a difference between the two. You might think we want the culture, the country to grow, but that we can sacrifice human beings in the way of doing it. That's not acceptable at all. So the human person should be the foundation and the goal of any social structure. That's why I think sometimes when we think about the family, it's very sad, family-wise, to think about parents who wants kids for them, for their own well-being. Like a mother who feels like, a woman who feels like I have to have babies because my sister have babies. But when the baby comes, and this is the bad part, she doesn't really care much for the baby. She doesn't care much for the kids. All what she cares is that she became a mother, and that's all what they did for her. That's what she's getting from the babies. And instead of the baby being the focus of attention, she become the focus of attention. That's sad. That's very sad. So we think of each person as a foundation and goal of any social structure. And I talked while I was coming here about the principle of subsidiary. What's subsidiary? I think it's an old notion. If you want to understand subsidiary the best, it is against micromanagement. When the government or the father or the priest or the bishop wants to do everything by themselves, they're not letting anybody else do anything. So that's not divine. If you look at the image of God, God can do anything, right? Can he manage everything? Yes, he can. He can manage everything. He doesn't need angels. He doesn't need saints. He doesn't need patriarchs. He doesn't need apostles. He doesn't need anybody. But what does God do? Subsidize. He actually brings his authority down to many people and he let them share in it. They might not do it perfectly, and he knows that. But what he do? He let it happen with weakness. It's fine. So subsidiary, the principle of subsidiary is, again, it's micromanagement or collectivism. And that's what collectivism is another way of saying socialism, or not socialism, sorry. The communist. What's the communist? The person is not capable of taking care of themselves, will do everything for them, will make a choice. And anybody who opposes that choice will have to be taken out. So collectivism, it means like we're gonna have the group, that authority group has an idea of what is the best for the community. Everybody, the single people, don't have the choice to do that. So they have to take that out from them. That's collectivism. So subsidiary allows everyone to do what a person can do best. And also this collectivism can go to dictatorship, when people are actually saying, I know the best for this culture, I know the best for this church, I know the best for this community. No one else can have any idea what am I doing, and I'm doing the best for them. So that subsidiary allows every person to do what they can do best. This follows the example of God, whose while can do all things perfectly, let all his creatures do what they can, and allow for free will. Societies should be governed by virtue that cannot be separated from the gospel. This is the problem, that the gospel virtue is a divine virtue. This is the good that comes from God. And if and it actually makes a lot of sense. You think about it, it's common sense to those who can see it. Then, and any society that does not want to have this kind of virtue, they are actually not doing well, and they are on their way for ruin. Participation in voluntary associations relating to all aspects of society should be encouraged, like government, social, economic, sport, art. Anybody who can do something, this is part of the subsidiary. They join a group that actually working on the same thing. So they say a sport, somebody who likes soccer, they join in soccer leagues, they support the soccer game. Somebody wants to be involved in art, they should join an art union and do their best in what they can do naturally. So this is part of what we call subsidiary. So there's an example here from the divine image. The next point, and I have this question, so it says, what's the goal of society? And we said the goal of society is to develop every person to reach their goal, to reach their maturity. And now we talk about authority. What's the role of authority? How we see authority. Authority is made of individuals who are dedicated to the prosperity. What do? Set order, make laws, and expect obedience from all individuals in their domain. Without authority, there can be no order nor prosperity. If you leave people, each one to do whatever they please, it will be a chaos. There will be nothing called common good. I'll talk about that in a second. Governing authorities are from God. That's what the gospel is telling us, that every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. And those that exist, the authority that exists, have been instituted by God. Therefore, he who resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. What do we mean by this? When authorities are actually applying fair laws, and they are actually doing their best for the common good. But authority who are very clearly unfair, and they're working for themselves or working for a special group of people, a conscience is clear, free to not be obedient to them. You're gonna say, how is that? You can say it's very clear. Sometimes authority are working for a special group or working for a foreign entity or working for against the people, there is no yielding to that. Honor and obedience are due all governing authorities. The church pray for authorities. The most ancient church prayer attributed to Saint Clement of Rome. He was living during the emperors who persecuted Christians. What did he say about Nero? Grant to them, Lord, health, peace, concord, stability, so that they may exercise without offense the sovereignty that you have given them. It's not talking about really the emperor here. It's talking about like the police officers, the governors, the mayors, which are the local and the, we call them the active authority. Not the president. We're not talking about, although we are praying for the president and his government, but we're talking more about the ones involved in the direct governing of the communities. Master, heavenly King of ages, you give glory, honor, and power over the things of the earth to the sons of men. Direct, Lord, their counsel, following what's pleasing and acceptable in your sight. Then Saint Clement is asking God to give them the wisdom and the light to see what's good on behalf of God, so that by exercising with devotion and in peace and gentleness the power that you have given to them, they may find favor with you. That's a very beautiful prayer. This is the most ancient prayer from the 2nd century. What about political diversity when you think about different parties? It's actually morally acceptable, as long as they serve the common good of the community. Common good is important. This is coming from the Greek philosophers. What is common good according to Aristotle and more Plato? What's common good? We're going to talk about it in a minute. So political diversity are morally acceptable as long as they serve the common good of the community, not their own good. Parties can actually seek their own good, and this is difficult sometimes, and they can do manipulation. A lot of manipulation happen, but diversity help in controlling this deviation. If the political regimen adopts any laws contrary to the natural law or the common good of the community or the human rights of the individuals, it cannot achieve the common good of the communities. They will not achieve it if they are helping, if using different laws and contrary laws to the natural law, or they violating human rights. And again, this is something that some regimens have done. They persecute individuals and under the guise of protecting the common good. Authority should be elected by the free choice of the individuals. The laws are just laws as much as they reflect the truth of the divine laws, whatever is in the divine law. That's why, as a church, we're very unhappy about abortion being okay in this country, because it says that people can kill. And then they say, oh, it's not a child, it's only a piece of flesh or tissues or something. And we say, no, it is an individual. I like what Focus on the Family had done. They actually adopted a program. They pay for the ultrasound if the mother is about to think about abortion, and they say, we're going to give you a free ultrasound. Just take a look at the baby before you decide to kill it. Take a look at it, because they had promoted some of the pro-choice promoted that this is just a piece of tissue. It's not a human being. So maybe if the mother is able to see that it actually have head, legs, and arms and a beating heart, maybe the mother will understand what's going on. So they did this, and it actually was very effective. So a country that promotes the killing of babies and not allowing for the divine commandment to not kill, to not murder, to be their law, is not doing something for the common good. There should be checks and balances to prevent abuse of authority by a single individual or establishment. That's what we have. This is long, very long, old practice from the time of the first Roman law and accord. Actually, the Cicero had put in place some checks and balances for powers. That's why in Rome they had the synod. They had the synod, and the synod was actually always debating with Caesar, which and Julius Caesar had to be assassinated because the synod was not very agreeable with him, and they thought he was taking too much power, but they did it through that by killing him in the synod. So the checks and balances, that's why you have a president and you have a Congress. You have a House of Representative and you have the House of the Senate, or the senators. And in each state, there is checks and balances so that not someone takes the authority to themselves completely without opposition. Now we move to the common goods. What's the common good? The term common good originated in the writing of Plato, Aristotle, and Cicero. Plato and Aristotle are Greek, Cicero is Roman. It refers to the good that benefits the whole society, which is in contrast with the private good. Private good is benefit an individual or a group of individuals or a family, which is good of certain individual group of the society. The common good is the circumstances necessary. See, this is important. The common good is the circumstances. It's not a specific item. Circumstances necessary for the development of each individual as well as the development of the community as a whole. A common good would not hurt anybody. The common good should not hurt any single person. In fact, it benefits everybody. What do we mean by it? It's the just distribution of power and resources among various entities in society. What does it mean? Common good is, I'm going to give you authority, but not for you. It is actually to serve the community. That authority, that power that you can actually move people, employ people, fire people, bring stuff, buy stuff, is not for you to feel good about yourself or to have this as an honor. This is not a reward. It is actually to serve with it. So the just distribution of power and resources among various entities in society. Authorities should make available to every individual the basic needs for the fulfillment of each person's vocation to develop, to become what God intended them to come, and the making of a family. Authority has to establish the circumstances that make everybody develop. So somebody who's artistic, the society should develop this person, give them the circumstances to become the best artist they can be. Somebody who's very much mathematician, they have to be provided with the needs to become the best mathematicians. Somebody who is a humanistic, who wants to serve, he wants to be a doctor, he wants to be a social worker or a counselor, they should have the ability to do that. That is the circumstances that authority should do. And the making of a family, because this is how you become mature. We said without a family, nobody can develop, and these kids, the little kids that's developed, are not going to be mature humans. What are these things that's basic? Food, lodging, education, healthcare. So these are called circumstances. So number one, I'm sorry, I forgot number one. Number one is respect. Respect of each individual. That we have to have the respect, they have to have their voice, and they have to be free to express their voice and make sound decisions. That's number one. Yes. Let me see. If God designed us to have free will, how do we justify making laws that limit people's free will? And assuming that we do need laws, to what extent should morality influence how we make or vote to those laws? In other words, is the purpose of the governing body to prevent chaos or guide people morally? That's a good question. So I would answer the latter part is easy to answer. So the purpose of governing body to actually prevent chaos and to do guidance for people. so that we show them what's right and what's wrong. And this is by practicality. That's true, because now if you ask anybody in the common people in America and say, is, let's say, is lying to your boss in a job that relates to business matter right or wrong? They say wrong. Why they are wrong? Because the law forbid it. You have to be honest in your dealings in business. Otherwise, it'd be called fraud. You're fraudulent. And this is punishable by law. So actually, when you say, is having intimacy with somebody outside marriage good or bad? They will tell you it is okay. It's not, it's morally acceptable. Why? Because the government had said this one is not morally acceptable, but this one is. So there is something about guidance there, that the government and society and authorities guide people morally because they considered authority, they know better. But at the same time, they also meant to prevent chaos by putting the limits of the law. What is lawful, what's not lawful. And then the first part says, assuming that we do need laws, to what extent should morality influence how we vote for those laws? By all means, we need to involve our morality in it. This is a tough one. From one aspect, you say, so how am I considering myself better than others in judgment of what's right and what's wrong? Not me. This is the point that I think we go wrong on. Not me. If I'm a Christian and I believe in God and I believe in his son and I believe in the gospel, then it is not my laws. It is not my right and wrong. It is what I believe to be the right and wrong. I'm not setting myself as a moral guide for anybody. I'm actually letting God be the moral guide for me and for society. And I cannot be double-minded. So I cannot be saying it's okay for the culture to do this, but it's not okay for God. Then what am I doing? Who am I then? From one side, I belong to God. From the other side, I belong to the culture. And if the culture is not godly, where I stand, then we're going to have to speak to the martyrs of the first century, the first 3 centuries. They tell you that. From one aspect, I believe in Christ and I believe in the triune God. From the other aspect, it's okay to offer incense to the gods of the Romans, if that's the case, because they made the law. If you don't offer God to the Caesar and to the gods of Caesar, you will be killed. And they didn't say that. They said, no, we have one God and we know what he is and how he is thinking about things. So this is not a wrong thing to say. I can be free to make a judgment on the laws and I accept what I think is godly and what's not godly. Sometimes people, this is what happens in the church. They say, that's not my business. This is their business, but you're part of this society and you know what's right and what's wrong. And you know that when a society doesn't do well, they end up destroying themselves. Am I morally responsible or not? Yes, I am. And that's what all the prophets of the Old Testament went through, all the martyrs went through, until the whole world was changed and became Christian at one point. And now the world is turning back. So yes, I have a freedom to make sound decisions and with a good conscience. And I cannot be of double conscience. I cannot be two consciences, conscious towards God, conscious towards society. That's too much. Nobody can do this. The second thing is we said just distribution of power. And the third one is establishment of peace. When we talk about just distribution of power and resources, we're thinking of developing each individual to be mature and to make a good family, to make a family, which is what's the basic requirement of food, lodging, education, healthcare. In this country, because it started as a Christian country, everyone, when they reach their 18 years old, have the ability, believe it or not, to get married, have an apartment, get supplies, get a job, drive. So this country, based on Christian principles, has prepared or has given the person the ability to do that. Whether it is easy one or not, that's another one. But everyone, when they hit 18 years old, they can get married, something we cannot do in Egypt. In Egypt, nobody can get married at age 18. No way. Unless you live with your parents in a rural culture where you live with them in the same house and they are going to spend money on you and have you work and all that stuff for them. Nobody can do that in Egypt or the Middle East. But in this country, because it was a Christian country, they believe in this. They actually made it very possible for anybody who hits 18 years old to get married and have a family and have a place to live. And it's getting worse. It's getting difficult now because of the expense of living, but it's still feasible. To establish peace, and I said this is the last one on the common good. So common good is three things: respect of the individual freedom, and good conscience, distribution of power and resources to make a family and mature, and the third one is establishment of peace. No one can function without peace, and that's why you need an army. Army is not to offend or to take plans, to take land from other cultures or countries, or to take resources from somewhere else. The army is meant to protect the peace of the community. There is the common good of humanity. We don't need to forget that. Each country, each culture have the common good, but also there is a common good for whole humanity that calls for collaboration of all nations to help alleviate the suffering of humanity. So one nation knows they got exposed to flooding, like Pakistan recently, or the African continent with a lot of cultures and a lot of nations that's actually under poverty. So what do? The rest of the nations who have plenty of common good, they can collaborate together and help these communities. So there's a common good of humanity that we don't leave anybody behind. This is something morally very godly. The goal of the common good is for the development of persons. We said this. The value of the person should not be subordinated to the common good. Very important. Like when you say, for the sake of the common good of the culture, we're going to make everybody rich, but we have to sacrifice this tribe. We're going to have to sacrifice this group of people because they are obstructing our common good. Is that good? Morally acceptable? Not at all. And this is where it happened in history many times. Okay, let's continue on. Based on common good, what's contribution and duty? We have that in the questions. What is how each individual duty is to contribute to the common good? Now, we know that there is a common good of three things: freedom and respect, circumstances that mature a person and help them to have a family, and then peace. What is the contribution of each of us? There's a duty to contribute, actually. Each individual in the community should contribute toward the common good according to his or her ability. It is the duty of each individual to do what each can do. It might actually overlap with their own development. And this is the divine work, that God has made different people in the community that has different talents and different gifts, so that each of them will contribute. The contribution to the common good starts with their own family as helping and educating the family. That's the first one. Education. To contribute to the common good starts with education. You teach your kids, you're contributing to the common good. The contribution should include sharing in the political life of the community. We want, I personally want everybody to go and elect, everybody to go and vote for the leaders, because that's our contribution to the common good of the community by looking for a worthy, authentic, sincere leader who would lead people to virtue and develop each person. And again, and we said this, authority should not deviate from, because how can there be a common good when we are breaking the commandments of God, or we're deviating from divine commandments? How can there be any good? There is no good in that. We're calling on ourselves a great destruction. necessary precautions should be taken against acts of fraud or the evasion of community duties like taxes. The government should put a very strong hold on people trying to not give the taxes, not to pay their contribution of monetary contribution to the common good, because the taxes, as from our side of looking at it, from the personal side, we look at as we contribute to making roads, infrastructure, building the army, building the country, and this would help everybody. That's our contribution. But from the government, if the government abuses this to do more power for them, or this is their problem, I cannot say, I don't agree with this government, I didn't elect this government, so I'm not going to pay taxes. That's not acceptable. From my point of view, I need to do what I need to do. What they do with it is their job. And if I see that they have not done it, I don't elect them again. I actually object to what they do. I verbalize what I don't like what's happening, but I don't withdraw the taxes because that does not belong to me. This is the common good. Social justice. That's important. It's justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society. I know we're going a little bit away from what spiritual theology should be, but this is actually at the heart of our theology. So when we talk about social justice, everything has to be distributed fairly. It involves three aspects: respect of the human person. We said this is going to be the heart of everything we say. The human person that was made in the image of the Creator, esteeming the others as another self. That's the commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself is a summary of all the commandments of the old. And Jesus said, and as much as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. It is more of a duty toward the disadvantaged and to even the enemies. The gospel calls us to love enemies and to hate the evil they do. The gospel didn't say, love your enemies and love their actions. The gospel said, love your enemy, hate their actions. This is a very interesting irony, a contrast that people is struggling to keep, which is important to keep in mind. Love the person. You should hate what they do of evil. Respect of human person is number one, including the enemies, especially respecting the poor and the disadvantaged and the sick and the abandoned and the unborn kids and the orphans. Then the second one is human equality and differences. What do you mean by equality? That no matter what color, what race, what religion, what belief, what political association, what degree of wealth, they're all equal. But they have differences. What's the differences? The differences in their gifts, in their talents. Somebody's given much money, somebody's given not much money. Somebody is given a lot of knowledge, somebody's not given a lot of knowledge. Somebody's given a social status, somebody's not given any social status. Somebody's given recognition, somebody's not giving any recognition. And you name it, there's lots of that. Skills, intelligence, IQ. There's plenty of those differences, but yet in the sight of God and the sight of us as the children of God and angels of God, they're all equal. They're equals as human, but they're given different gifts. So what is meant by the variation distribution of gifts? What's meant? Subsidiary again. What have should give what doesn't have. What they have more, they should give what they have less. And by doing this, they connect, they make a relationship, and they cover each other, and they supplement each other. So they're creating a unity that the rich loves the poor and sees the need of the poor. They feel for the poor, and they take the poor as their own family, as Jesus had taught us. He said, you do it to them, you're doing it to me. And he called them his brothers. So there's equality and differences. We have to keep the two in mind. Human unity. And this is important. In the Catholic catechesis, they call it the solidarity. We said subsidiary, common good, solidarity. Solidarity means we're all in the eyes of God are one. Every single human being coming together to God, we come as one. The gospel call for agape toward all stems from all that agape, the disinterested love or the unconditional love stems from the fundamental truth that all humanity is a unity, something we don't think about much. Although the unity was broken by the original sin, Christ on the cross reunited humanity in himself. He brought us all together in one again. The apostles invited all peoples to share in the unity of the body of Christ. Christians are called to share their material goods and even more, the spiritual goods with all men. The gospel call for unity among the poor and between the poor and the rich, among the working class and between the workers and the work owners. Let this unity be fostered by the responsible authorities as well. That there is no differentiation. One problem with the two big systems in the world today is socialism, or Marxism was one of them, is this idea, they call it the conflict theory. And I wanted to tell you about the conflict theory. In the Marxist ideology, either Marcus himself, Karl Marx himself, or the other people that actually developed his theory, they think there's going to be always a conflict. They call it the conflict theory between the proletariat, which is the work owners, the rich people, and the bourgeoisie, that's the working people, or the opposite. Proletariat is the working people, bourgeoisie, the owners, the rich people. And this conflict is the work owners wants to have more work from the workers and give them less money so they can save, while the workers wants more from the owners and less work. So that creates a conflict because they have two opposite needs, and it leads them to clash. They call that the conflict theory. They apply this to everything, including humans, including, I'm sorry, the family. They said the wife wants more control and less work, and the husband wants more interested in the wife being submissive, and working more, and he doesn't want to do any of the work. And that creates also this tension in the family. They apply it every way. They say in the bank, sometimes that's true. And that's why they pick on the capitalists. They say in the capitalist, this is very clear. In the capitalism, there is owners and workers. There is a higher class and lower class, and the higher class control the laws to submit, to make everyone who is in the worker class unable to be part of them. So they push them down all the time. And the lower class is very angry and is boiling, and it leads to a revolution at one point. Marx said revolution is inevitable. It's going to have to happen. But they never talk about unity, that both of them are working for some goal and both of them are benefiting. I know owners of businesses, they have their workers share in the profit. And they say, if you do good, you're going to benefit. And they actually are very fair. And one of the very holy persons said, I don't own this business. It's owned by all of us. I put the money down, but when we get a profit, we share it. All of us share it equally, as if they are actually part of this ownership. And he's very successful. There's no conflict. And after a while, those the workers developed enough interest, enough money to have their own businesses. So this does not apply all the time. When you have a Christian mind, it doesn't have to be this way. But both the capitalist, which is an ideology, and the Marxist is thinking it's a conflict, it's a competition. And it doesn't allow for any Christian value to kind of emerge. They don't think of it this way. Think, leave it to humans, that's what they will do. And they will always do it this way. Is that the case? No, that's not the case. Absolutely not. And we refuse to accept it as the case. Yes, and that's why the authorities have to step in and make laws to supervise this and make sure that nobody does take this into a conflict and make it out of the unity model, the unity that everybody is sharing. This is what the Trinity is doing. When God the Father shares all his glory with the Son and the Spirit, when the Son dying on the cross gives it to the Father to glorify the Father, and the Spirit takes that and give it to us, and we're all sharing in this, in the glory of the Father, in the sacrifice of the Son, in the gifts of the Spirit. We're all sharing in it because that's what God intended from the beginning. There is nothing selfish or conflicting. So that's the second part, and we were done with this about the human communion, meaning the relationship of people together. And we got a very beautiful question today, and I hope I answered it. And that's what we have. If you have any questions, so I'm going to conclude. Let's say, Our Father, make us worthy, Lord, say thankfully, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord. Thine is the kingdom, power, and glory now and forever. Amen. The love of God the Father and grace of His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you. Peace be with you.